Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is a longer fairy tale. It's from the Crimson Fairy book. It's called The Prince and the Dragon. Once upon a time there lived an emperor who had 3 sons. They were all fine young men who were very fond of hunting, and scarcely a day passed without one or other of them going out to look for game. One morning, the eldest mounted his horse and set out for a forest where wild animals of all sorts were to be found. He had not long left the castle when a hare sprang out of a thicket and dashed across the road in front. The young man gave chase over hill and dale, till at last the hare took refuge in a mill. This mill was actually by the side of a river. The prince followed and entered the mill, but stopped in terror by the door, for instead of a hare, before him stood a dragon, breathing flames. At this fearful sight, the prince turned to flee, but a fiery tongue coiled around his waist and drew him into the dragon's mouth, and he was seen no more. A week passed, and when the prince never came back, everyone in the town began to grow uneasy. At last, his next brother told the emperor that he likewise would go out to hunt, and that perhaps he would find some clue as to his brother's disappearance. Hardly had the castle gates closed, then the hare sprang out of the bushes as before, and led the huntsman up the hill and down dale, till they reached the mill. Into this the hare flew, with the prince at his heels, when, lo, instead of the hare there stood a dragon breathing flames, and out shot a fiery tongue, which coiled around the prince's waist, and lifted him into the dragon's mouth, and again he was seen no more. Days went by, and the emperor waited for the sons who never came, and he could not sleep at night for fear of what may happen to his sons. All his mind could do was wonder of what had become of them. His youngest son wished to go in search of his brothers, but for a long time the emperor refused to listen, lest he should lose him also. But the prince begged so hard and promised so often that he would be very, very careful, that at length the emperor agreed. Full of hope, the young prince started on his way, but no sooner was he outside the city, a hare sprang out of the bushes and ran before him, till once again they reached the mill. As before, the animal dashed through the open door, but this time he was not followed by the prince. Wiser than his brothers, the young man turned away, saying, "There are as good hares in the forest as any that have come out of it, and when I have caught them, I can come back and look for you." For many hours he rode up and down the mountain. He saw nothing, and at last he went back to the mill. Here he found an old woman sitting, whom he greeted pleasantly. "Good morning to you, little mother," he said. And the old woman answered, "Good morning, my son." "Tell me, little mother," went the prince, "where shall I find my hare?" "My son," replied the old woman, "that was no hare indeed, but a dragon, who has led many men hither, and then has eaten them all." At these words, the prince's heart grew heavy, and he cried, "Then my brothers must have come here and been eaten." "You have guessed right," answered the old woman. "You should go home at once, before the same fate overtakes you." "Will you not come with me out of this dreadful place?" said the young man. "He took me prisoner too," answered she, "and I cannot shake off his chains." "Then listen to me," cried the prince. "When the dragon comes back, ask him where he always goes when he leaves here, and what makes him so strong. And when you have coaxed the secret from him, tell it to me when I come the next time." The prince went home. The old woman remained at the mill, and as soon as the dragon returned, she said to him, "Where have you been all this time?" "I have travelled far," answered he. Then the old woman began to flatter him and to praise his cleverness, and when she thought she had got him into a good temper, she said, "I have wondered so often where you get your strength from. I do wish you would tell me. I would stoop and kiss the place out of pure love." The dragon laughed at this and answered, "In the hearthstone yonder lies the secret of my strength." Then the old woman jumped up and kissed the hearth, whereat the dragon laughed the more, and said, "You foolish creature, I was only jesting. It is not in the hearthstone, but in that tall tree, that one that lies the secret of my length." Then the old woman jumped up again and put her arms around the tree and kissed it heartily. Loudly, the dragon laughed while she was doing this. "Old fool," he cried, "did you really believe that my strength came from that tree?" "Where is it then?" asked the old woman. She was getting quite cross because she was being made fun of. "My strength," replied the dragon, "lies far away, so far that you could never reach it. Far, far from here is a kingdom, and by its capital city is a lake. And in the lake is a dragon. Inside the dragon is a wild boar, and inside the wild boar a hare, and inside the hare a pigeon, and then inside the pigeon is a sweet sparrow. The sparrow is my strength." And when the old woman heard this, she thought it was no use flattering him any longer, for never, never could she take his strength from him. The following morning, when the dragon had left the mill, the prince came back. The old woman told him everything that the creature had said. He listened in silence, then returned to his castle, where he put on a suit of shepherd's clothes, and taking a staff in his hand, he went forth to seek the place as tender of sheep. For some time he wandered from village to town till he came to a large city in a distant kingdom, surrounded on three sides by a great lake, which happened to be the very lake in which the dragon lived. As was his custom, he stopped everybody when he met in the street people that looked likely to want a shepherd, and begged for them to engage him. But no one needed one. The prince was beginning to lose heart when a man said that he had better go and ask the emperor, as he was in search of someone. He may want someone to tend his flocks. When the young prince, well, he looked like a young shepherd man, went before the emperor, his majesty said, "Outside the city walls you will find a very, very large lake, and by its banks lie the richest meadows in my kingdom. When you are leading out your flocks to pasture, they will run straight on these meadows, and none that have gone there have ever come back. Take heed, therefore, my son, not to suffer your sheep to go where they will, but drive them to any spot that you think's best." With a low bow, the prince promised to do his best to keep the sheep safe. Then he went to the marketplace, where he bought 2 greyhounds, a hawk, and a set of pipes. After that, he took the sheep out to the pasture. The instant the animals caught sight of the lake, they trotted off as fast as their little legs would go to the green meadows round it. The prince did not try to stop them. He only placed his hawk on the branch of a tree, laid his pipes on the grass, and bade the greyhounds sit still. Then, rolling up his sleeves and trousers, he waded into the water, crying as he did so. The words he cried were this: "Dragon, if you are not a coward, come out and fight with me." And a voice answered from the depths of the lake, "I am waiting for you, O prince." And the dragon reared out of the water, huge and horrible to see. The prince sprang upon him, and they grappled with each other and fought together till the sun was high and it was noon. Then the dragon gasped, "O prince, let me dip my burning head once into the lake, and I will hurl you up to the sky." But the prince answered, "Oh no, my good dragon. Do not crow too soon. If the emperor's daughter were only here and would kiss me on the forehead, I would throw you up higher still." And suddenly the dragon's hold loosened, and he fell back into the lake. As soon as it was evening, the prince washed away all signs of the fight, took his hawk up on his shoulder and his pipes under his arm, and with his greyhounds in front and his flock following after him, he set out for the city. And they passed through streets. The people stared in wonder. They were amazed. You see, they had never actually seen one single flock return from the lake. The next morning he rose early and led his sheep down the road to the lake. This time, however, the emperor sent 2 men on horseback to ride behind him, with orders to watch without being seen. As soon as the sheep went towards the meadows and they ran with their little legs, they turned aside up a steep hill, which overhung the lake. When the shepherd reached the place, he laid, as before, his pipes on the grass, and bade the greyhounds sit beside them, while the hawk he perched on the branch of the tree. Then he rolled up his trousers and his sleeves, and waded into the water, crying, "Dragon, oh dragon, if you are not a coward, come out and fight with me." And the dragon answered, "Oh, but I am waiting for you, prince." And he reared out of the water, huge and horrible to see. Again they clasped each other. They fought until it was noon, and when the sun was at its hottest, the dragon gasped, "O prince, let me dip my burning head once in the lake, and I will hurl you up into that sky." The prince answered, "Oh no, 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 my good dragon, do not crow too soon. If the emperor's daughter were only here and would kiss me on the forehead, I would throw you up higher still." And suddenly the dragon's hold loosened, and he fell back into the lake. As soon as it was evening, the prince again collected his sheep, and, playing on his pipes, he marched before them into the city. And when he passed through the gates, all the people came out of their houses to stare in wonder, because they had once never seen sheep return, and this was twice now they had returned. Meanwhile, the 2 horsemen had ridden quickly back and told the emperor everything that they saw. The emperor listened eagerly, then called his daughter to him and repeated it to her. "Tomorrow," he said, when he had finished, You shall go with the shepherd to the lake. You shall kiss him on the forehead, as he wishes." But when the princess heard these words, she burst into tears and sobbed out, "Will you really send me, your only child, to that dreadful place, from which most likely I shall never come back?" "Fear nothing, my little daughter, all will be well. Many shepherds have gone to that lake, and none have ever returned, but this one has. In 2 days, both days, fought twice with that dragon, and has escaped without a single wound. So I hope tomorrow he will kill the dragon and deliver the land from the monster who has slain so many of our bravest men." Scarcely had the sun begun to peep over the hills the next morning when the princess stood by the shepherd's side, ready to go to the lake. The shepherd was brimming with joy, but the princess only wept bitterly. "Dry your tears, I implore you," said he, "if you will do what I ask. And when the time comes, run and kiss my forehead. You have nothing to fear." Merrily the shepherd blew on his pipes as he marched at the head of the flock, only stopping every now and then to say to the weeping girl at his side, "Do not cry. Trust me and fear nothing." And so they reached the lake. In an instant the sheep were scattered all over the meadows, and the prince placed the hawk on the tree as usual. He laid his pipes upon the grass, while he bade his greyhounds to lie beside them. Then he rolled up his sleeves, rolled up his trousers, and waded into the water, calling as usual, "Dragon, if you are not a coward, come forth, let us have one more fight together." The dragon answered, "I am waiting for you, O prince," and reared out of the water, huge and horrible to see. Swiftly he drew near to the bank, and the prince sprang to meet him, and they grasped each other and fought till it was noon. When the sun was at the hottest, the dragon cried, "O prince, let me dip my burning head in the lake, and I will hurl you to the sky." But the prince answered, "Oh no, my good dragon, do not crow too soon. If the emperor's daughter were only here, and she would kiss my forehead, I would throw you higher still." Hardly had he spoken when the princess, who had been listening, ran up and kissed him on the forehead. Then the prince swung the dragon straight up into the clouds, and when he finally came down, he touched the earth and not his lake, and he broke into 1,000 pieces. One of the pieces there sprang a wild boar, and it galloped away, but the prince called his hounds to give chase. They caught the boar and tore it to bits. Out of the pieces there sprang a hare, and in a moment the greyhounds were after it. They caught it and killed it, and out of the hare there came a pigeon. Quickly the prince let his hawk go, which soared straight into the air, swooped upon the bird, and brought it to its master. The prince could open the body and found the sparrow inside, just as the old woman had said. "Now," cried the prince, holding the tiny sparrow in his hands, "now you shall tell me where I can find my brothers." "Do not hurt me," answered the sparrow, "and I will tell you with all my heart. Behind your father's castle stands a mill, and in the mill are 3 slender twigs. Cut off these twigs and strike their roots with them, and the iron door of the cellar will open. In the cellar, you will find so many people, young and old, women and children, as would fill a kingdom, and among them are your brothers. By this time twilight had fallen, so the prince, washed in the lake, took the hawk on his shoulder, the pipes under his arm, and with his greyhounds before him and his flock behind him, marched gaily into the town. The princess followed them all, still trembling with fright, and so they passed through the streets, thronged with such a wondering were the crowd. They watched until he finally reached the castle. Unknown to anyone, the emperor had stolen out on horseback and had hidden on the hill, where he could see all that happened. When all was over, and the prince and the power of the dragon was broken, obviously by the prince, returned to the castle, the emperor was waiting for him, and he was ready to receive the prince with open arms, and to promise him his daughter as a wife. The wedding took place with great splendour, and for a whole week the town was hung with coloured lamps, and tables were spread all over in the halls of the castle for all who would come and all who would celebrate to eat. And when the feast was over, the prince told the emperor and the people who he really was, and everyone rejoiced even more. And preparations were made for the prince and princess to return to their own kingdom, for the prince was impatient to set free his two brothers. The first thing he did when he reached his native country was to hasten towards the mill, where he found the 3 twigs that the sparrow had told him. The moment that he struck their roots, the iron door flew open, and from the cellar countless multitudes of men, women streamed forth. He bade them go on, by one, whatsoever you should carry on going and not look back. All he wanted was to find his brothers, and he waited, watching the rest pass, hoping to finally see his brothers passing by. And how delighted was he when he saw them and they met again, and to hear all that the prince had done to deliver them. And they went home and served him all the days of their lives, for they said that only he was fit to be king. The end. That's the end of that story. That's a really long story. It's kind of like a couple of other stories, though obviously they are different, but the main basic principles regarding the dragon is the same, even though different, which is strange. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this tale, and please hit the like, share if you can, and subscribe if you've not yet done so. Many blessings.